in transforming the grim, abusive, violent, and yet often serene reality of the subway into a language of color, I see the subway as a metaphor for the world in which we live in today. From all over the earth, people come into the subway. It's a great social equalizer. As our being is exposed, we confront our mortality, contemplate our destiny, and experience both the beauty and the beast. From the moving train above ground, we see glimpses of the city, and as the trains move into the tunnels, sterile fluorescent light reaches into the stony gloom, and we, trapped inside, all hang on together. And as promised, I bring you for episode number 2 of books Subway by Bruce Davidson. This is a book that I've been really fascinated about, and it took me a really long time to find one, at least at affordable prices. And Bruce Davidson is someone that I really admire, that over his career has developed so many different projects, and each of them has their own beauty, I would put it this way. And if you want to know more about Bruce Davidson and this book, every link will be in the description, or at least links that I could find that were, interesting for you to read or to know more about Bruce Davidson. So be sure to check those if you want to know more. And I think that I've talked about Bruce Davidson earlier in the channel, probably in one of the earliest episodes of Film Photographers You Should Know. So I'm gonna link that video here or probably in the description. And yeah, without further ado, let's explore, favorite photos, what this book is telling us, what we can learn, and all of that, and a bit about, Bruce Davidson. And yeah, I guess that you should grab your drink, make yourself comfortable, and we'll go straight into today's video. In 1980, photographer Bruce Davidson, who had been photographing New York City throughout his career, decided to embark on a journey through the city's subway system. At first, he started by photographing in black and white, but he then realized that color would be a better option to capture the atmosphere of this world. And New York City's subway in the 1980s was a dangerous world, where you could expect the unexpected. It was colorful, decorated by many insignias and graffitis. It was full of life, sights, sounds, and speeds. It was intoxicating at times, dangerous at others. It was what many called a jungle. And he spent a long time shooting the subway. He was on it constantly, going on for miles and miles through the city, uncovering different stations, different parts of the city, which he'd never been or seen before. He got lost, robbed, and admittedly obsessed with this world. But at the same time, we all have to recognize that he came up with one of the most unique and beautiful bodies of work that probably we'll ever see. The trick here is to look beyond appearances. What can appear common, it's not very common, because sometimes we have to look at a photo and break it down into shapes, like if we were to do with a painting or with drawing. And this is probably one of the earliest things that anybody would tell you when you go to school for drawing, painting, etc. It's that you have to break things into shapes. And I think this is very important with photography, because by looking around and breaking things into shapes, we can see better sometimes how things get along together, how contrasts come in create a sort of game, an interesting visual, and how colors come together. And definitely Bruce Davidson did this, or at least not this sort of like breaking things down into shapes, but he definitely had an eye for little details like this, little shapes and shadows, contrasts, colors, and his compositions are really, really beautiful and original. And although we could argue that, of course, Bruce Davidson did benefited from the use of Kodachrome and from Kodachrome being such a saturated film and etc. But then we have to realize that even in today's world, there's a lot of photographers and artists and people that have access to very expensive tools or very, highly regarded tools. And I'm sure that back in the days, a lot of people had access to Kodachrome, but that didn't necessarily mean that they would become great photographers or that their work would become highly successful or popular. And I think that the reason why this book and this work and these photos stand the test of time, it's because of Bruce Davidson's vision. It's a very humane vision, and not just as a photographer, but as a human being. Its use of color and flash is clever, but stands also because of what the photo stands for. And in this case, color talks to us viewers through these photos. It highlights a detail of the city in the background, a chain, an earring, or an object someone carries. It speaks in a manner that is vibrant, that it almost makes us hear the subway running past the city, the cars outside, people talking in the background. And overall, what this book does is to show us the beauty in the everyday life, and that color and beauty reside as much above ground as they do underground. And I picked this book because to me, this is a book of impressions. It's not closed. It's not just what it is or what it represents. It's about the collection of numerous moments in time and how they transpire a sort of energy about them, and how those impressions are so vivid and real that we can feel them. We can feel the unbearable heat of the underground, the sense of claustrophobia during rush hour, and the wanting of getting away. Just like we feel the weight of the wire fences, the stress, the danger of being alone sometimes, the unexpected happiness after a long or gloomy day at work. And as I go through this book and reading about Bruce's experiences, it was reminiscent as well of things that happened to me while being a passenger on the underground, subway, metro, tube, U-Bahn, whatever it is that you call it. It reminded me when I was grabbed or saw the police arresting someone, saw crazy people performing, preaching, of looking through the window, trying to find an escape point, something interesting to look at, looking at other people, feeling uneasy, stressed, and trust me, a book that can transport you this far into your memory and imagination and make you relate with it so much is definitely worth your time. Now, when it comes to my favorite photo or photos, I guess as usual, I found a couple. Although there's always been one that impressed me, way before I even got this book, because I'd come across it a while ago when going through Bruce Davidson's work. The colors are amazing, but what gets me is the dramatism in her pose. It's like she's seeking for something, for freedom to get away, for something she probably has yet to find. And I don't know why, but I just really love it. And I think the biggest lesson with this book as well for everybody is to find beauty everywhere. And like I said before, beauty and, everything that can interest you as a photographer, you can find it as much as above ground as you can it underground. And I feel like Subway and places like this, especially when they're dangerous, it gets, or places like neighborhoods and etc., they get sort of a connotation, a really bad connotation, as to the type of people that live there, the type of places, experiences that you'll probably live. And I think that as photographers or artists or creatives, I think we shouldn't take things based on preconceptions. And this is the point. I think the point of art is to make something based off what you know as a skill. And just try and transform whatever it is that you see into something meaningful or into something that has a story. And I think what Bruce Davidson did here was kind of like conceive a movie, but through stills. And one of the basic things that this is telling us, or at least telling me, is how important it is to gather pictures together. Say, if you go to the subway, be spontaneous and take photos, or a birthday party or a friend's house or whatever, and see how these photos interact with one another and what significance they produce. And I think this is important because sometimes we have that idea of just taking photos and archiving them and, just letting them be. It's not that we need to make photo books every year or every so couple of years, and we don't need to actually make photo books for other people, but sometimes we need to make this for us in order to kind of like learn with ourselves. And sometimes learning by ourselves is one of the best experiences we can have. And this will definitely project things, such as the idea of the language of photography. And the language of photography is very basic. It's about capturing something and make it stand the test of time, I think. Or maybe look up for something that you really want and try and, use it as a tool for storytelling. Who knows? I mean, I think to talk about photography and language of photography is a very complicated story because there's a lot of things involved in here. So I guess that this has been random thoughts that I just collected now and just said it out loud. So I hope that this video has been helpful in any way, that you enjoyed going through this book. And I guess that I'll see you here for another video very soon with this series. And as a hint for the next episode, I would say Plains, Georgia. And that should be enough. Peace.